sources of green energy. That is the key thing. So the 2 or 3 front runners, which are good energy, there is ecotricity, there's another one called, I think it's GEUK now, used to be called green energy. Those 3 are, and Octopus, all of those 3 are spending money on creating new renewable resources. But you'll see the reasons in the table. And the table is important because not everybody's got spare money to spend a little bit more. Good energy and ecotricity are, electricity is dearer. If you're on a really low tariff and you're struggling, I think you're going to probably want to choose somebody that's orange in their table rather than green, because you want to keep your bills down. I can afford it, so I'm on good energy myself, but I know there's plenty of people. Now, this event today is running a little bit behind, so I want to, there's not going to be any chance for questions, but I'm going to say the same as James, which is come over and talk to us after this event. I shall be near James' table on the right-hand side here. If anybody's got any questions, come to me. And then I think perhaps the most important thing to say is to thank Dr. Benjamin for creating this event. It's a wonderful idea, and it's really, you need more events like this in Milton Keynes. And thank goodness somebody with the energy and enthusiasm to do it has come along. So we're really, all of us in the environment solution, are very grateful.
Good morning, everybody. You want to come up and do the MC role?
Yeah, I would like to thank you for the speech and hand over to our next speaker. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad this is happening for all kinds of reasons. One of them, that too often the people who are enthusiastic about green issues are talking to each other. I have a sense of a really interesting initiative here to speak to different communities in different ways around different concerns like food and music and dance as well. And that's why I love the idea of this event, and I'm glad to be here. So thank you for the invitation. I'm also seeing younger people here too, which is fantastic. So my contribution focuses on carbon and how we can drive it out of the economy. Because if you aren't addressing the carbon issue, you're not for real. Okay, this is ultimately about carbon and getting it out of the economy. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, we don't actually need to panic. This is a great work that's being undertaken, and it will take decades. So for the young people here, our generation has woken up to the problem. Your generation must make the changes. This is your challenge, and you need to get on with it. So think about that for when you're choosing jobs and careers. Which side are you going to be on? So that's the second thing. It's multi-level. Well, the second thing is it's the time scale. We're talking years. It's not just about winning the next election. That's important and so on. We'll come to that perhaps. It's about time scales and years. And it affects everyone. When I look around here, I think of the people who will have family, not just in this country, but other countries that are already being washed out of their homes or driven out of their homes by fire. So this is happening now, and it needs to be addressed with urgency. I really welcome the individual changes that are being recommended. I salute them. They're important for all kinds of reasons. I really welcome the community and business level changes. They're vital too. But there is some, and Milton Keynes has been a leader in that respect. I'll point to one that hasn't been mentioned yet. But there are some things that only a government can do. There are some things that only government can do, and we must make sure that government does. And that's why Melton Keynes has actually been a path breaker in another way that doesn't get mentioned. Okay? A number of years ago, Citizens MK asked the leaders of the three parties before the election, will you support the idea of climate income? And they said, well, I don't know what that is. Not sure about that. And we said, well, can you check it out, please? Because we're going to ask you in an assembly if you'll support it. This was during lockdown, so kind of slightly limited process. But the result was quite surprising. When it came to it, we got a unanimous vote from the council, including enthusiastic speeches by people like Robin Blackburn, now the deputy leader, saying, well, I didn't know about this, but it's really neat. The Conservative group was whipped into line to support it as well. So there are policies which can work and gather in enthusiastic support for a common ground policy. Common ground, not the usual bickering, something that all the parties could subscribe to. And that was what came out of it. We repeated the exercise a few months later. Some of you were there. We had the Bishop of Oxford at an assembly on the climate crisis. And we put the ask to him as well, will you, and this guy is on the House of Lords Environment Committee, so he's really at the centre of some of this. We said to him, will you support the climate income policy? And he said, well, we're not sure about that, I don't know about that. So I said, well, will you meet us to talk about it? And he said, yes, I'll meet you to talk about it, he said a bit doubtfully. Before we even met him, he'd asked a supportive question in the House of Lords. We met him, he said, yes, you can count me as a supporter of this, and here's access to my advisors if you need support in carrying this out. So I'm going to stop now, but the point I'm leaving you with is don't take my word for it. Do what those council leaders did and what the bishop did. Check it out for yourself. Climate income. Is this guy barking? Or is there something here that we could all support that would bring us together in a climate policy and that would have real leverage tackling the carbon issue? So find out for yourselves, folks. Okay.
I wanted to sort of say a few things about potentially about energy efficiency in the built environment, about housing and other things. To me, I'm very passionate in making sure that buildings are as efficient as possible. Not only will that reduce the carbon emissions, which I think is really important, but also in terms of people's health. There are a lot of studies now to show that bad housing is causing huge amounts of problems with the NHS. So as a society, if we can improve people's homes, we'll improve carbon and we'll also help improve people's lives and communities and so forth. There's been some research that if you spend all the money improving people's homes, then that will be paid back in communities, let alone the energy bills. But in terms of renewable energy, the first renewable really is efficiency. Until you can reduce those demands down. You look at the total carbon emissions in the UK, I think it's 50% is in buildings. Of that, a majority of that is housing. And the majority of the housing which we get to 2050, where we need to be zero carbon, have already been built. We have to do something about the existing buildings. So I would encourage everyone to look at what they're doing. And I'd also, the other message I'd like to put from topics is to make sure that when you are doing a measure, do it well. Because you can have one opportunity to do these things. You won't want to put a small amount of insulation on and then redo it later. Do that one well, look at the thermal bridge in the air tightness, all sorts of other technical things. You can talk to me about technical things if you want to think, but I'm not going to go into that today because I think it'll bore you. But we can do huge things to make buildings better, and it's important that you do things well at each element. And maybe look at whole house plan. It's encouraging to see the community works look at whole house plans. So if you can't afford to do everything in one go, just do piecemeal as you go through, but look at the moisture and ventilation as you go through. Was there any other topics you wanted to particularly talk about? I think home energy was the last one, really, wasn't it, rather than this one? But
well, I think the only question I'm going to ask you, is how do you think we're going to reduce the emission, emanation from the buildings? How do we improve, our building.
Okay, there's a number of principles, basically. Insulation. So if we just probably going to save about 30%. Draft proofing, which is something that's not often thought about. So making your house airtight. Probably another 30%. Improving the shape of building. If you've got if you've got a front door that is recessed in, moving that front door out could make 5-10% difference. It sounds small, it's quite simple, but having a less surface area losing heat can make a big difference. Good windows, so you're not losing heat, and you're going to turn against, and you're not overheating. Overheating again is a really big issue. I think last week, I saw a survey that was over 50% of UK houses were over 26 degrees, which is uncomfortable. And that was September. So we do need to do stuff about that as well. Thermal bridging. This is the junctions of how things are constructed, make sure that's done well. There's some really good encouragement happening actually. Scotland have been fantastic as a government. They've now said that all new housing is to be to the equivalent of the Passive House Standard. They don't call it the Passive House Standard, but they put all the criteria in there that is the Passive House Standard, which will reduce new build housing by about, it's going down from about 110 kilowatts down to 15 for every house. So that's quite a big step forward. And what's really encouraging now is some of the big contractors are going along to find out about this stuff, and they'll because they have to in Scotland. But I can see that running out over the country, so I think there is hope.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I now invite Mr. Melton. It's about circular economy.
So, in looking at the local economy, we could look at linear or circular economy. If we want to go linear, we could just keep creating new things all the time. And if we're thinking about the subject of sustainability, that's not going to help us. So, thinking circular is how you're able to reuse, recycle, and when I was speaking earlier, I referenced some ideas. So before I go into that, I removed my jacket partly because I was warm, but also to talk about my shirt. Not to show off, but my shirt on the cuffs and the lapel is from an old headgear of my wife. So I'm showing and talking about practical reusability. So these are simple things we can do. So, but I thought it's contextual, so I wore it today. And the fact that she used to have this headgear, and I gave it to someone going to Nigeria to say, okay, this lady could make something, we explain. I mean, this is simple, but there are bigger ways. I mentioned the concept of having a car subscription club. So we have a few car companies in Melton Keynes, yeah? And what if the car company supports the local economy by having a situation where it's also a family-oriented city, right? So having a car subscription service where you don't need to drive your car, you don't go around polluting the environment, you can potentially just subscribe to use the car, like the scooters, and say, I need to use a car for 4 hours a week, or 2 hours a week, and you subscribe to use it that way. You have an app or a portal where you can see, just like the scooters, where they are, you pick it off, you drop it off, and that's it. That's a simple idea. It's about reusing, recycling, and you can also have, toy swap schemes, where I don't know if parents will buy into that, but with the good education, you don't need to buy new ones because you need to put batteries into them, the remote controls and whatnot. You can have the toy